Hi, I'm Susan, and welcome to Susan Stanley Stitch in Time, a special edition episode where we're going to look at how I made my paper dolls. And so many of you were so interested in that element to the story that I've created around my series First Stitches. I want to show you today what I did, the materials I used, and the process I used, and so you can create your own and have your own box of 1870s paper dolls to go along with the doll quilt and the other items that I've been sharing as we learn how children learned to sew in the 19th century. So here are a few of the paper dolls that I made. These are from 1870, and at the end I'm going to link all the places I found open access paper dolls available for you to download and create your own version. These are from the Cooper Hewitt Museum. And I wanted to pull them out to show you that some, when you download, only give you the front. Some give you the front and the back. And I want to show you today how I lined up the front and the back items, because they don't line up exactly right. So this one, I just used scrapbook paper on the back, so there's no issues with lining things up. So I'm going to share with you how to do that. I'm going to share with you how I made my paper dolls, and at the end, like I said, I'm going to show you where you can find them yourself, and I'm actually going to show you how you click to find them, because it is a little tiny bit tricky. Now, you might think, why are you talking about paper dolls in a stitching or in a textile type setting? Painting was a part of a young woman's education in the 19th century, and even our dear Queen Victoria was tasked with learning how to paint, and she actually created her own set of paper dolls, and I'm going to show you where you can find these as well. She created in her childhood over 100 paper dolls, and they were cut out and used and played with, and then by the time she was 14, she was to put them away, and they were not to be used and played with anymore, and so then they were glued into a book. But this was just a part of life in the 19th century, and if you're creating any of the doll quilts or marking samplers that I have offered to kind of understand this whole experience of stitching and the world that was going on around the stitching, you might want to just make one and stick it in your sewing box, or just have it just as a reminder of the overarching world and material culture that was happening. And just know that it wasn't just stitching and sewing. There was painting, there was creating these children were kept busy. So this is the image from the Cooper Hewitt, and like I said, I will show you. Now this one happens to have a front and a back. So this is the image we're going to be working with today. And I'll show you a few more at the end. But I want to first talk to you about the materials that you need to gather if you're going to make them. Now, I am not a paper doll making expert by any means, but I'll show you how I made mine. This is one of the image that does not have a back, and so if you decide to download some of the outfits and not have the doll completely put together, you'll probably want to get some scrapbook paper and decorative paper to use, wallpaper, dollhouse wallpaper, nice quality scrapbook paper that has a little bit of, this is a pretty pattern that would look nice, and it's timely. The time period's not off too much. This kind of Baroque textured paper looks good. You could even use solids. But those are some of the things that you'll need. You'll need paper. You will also, you need decorative paper if you're doing a one-sided item. If you, you will also need either recycled file folders. That's what I used on mine initially. This is actually a new one for the video, but I used old file folders that I had. This is the weight of paper that I found to work really well. You could also use Bristol paper. It's 96-pound weight paper, and it, you know, if you feel it, it has some heft to it, and I think that's really what they need. You don't want it to be so thick that you can't cut through it. But so those are a couple of the paper options that you'll need, or things you'll need. And I will make a materials list at the bottom of this video, so you can go out and get whatever you need if you don't have it on hand. I did also want to mention, when I printed these, I just printed them at home on my inkjet printer, and it worked fine. If you watch this video and you think, gosh, I don't know, that makes me nervous, I want LaserJet, you can certainly download the images and take them to a professional copy center and have them printed LaserJet. There is moisture in this process, but if you're careful, I didn't have a problem with the ink running. So that's just a little disclaimer there. All right, obviously, if you are working with paper, you're going to need paper scissors. And the two pairs that I use that I found really helpful, one is this Tim Holtz Ionic scissor. It's serrated, and it worked really well when I got to the last layer of cutting, because at that point you have 3 layers of paper. That worked really well for that. And then for the initial cutting out, I really liked these. Let me see if I can get that. They're EK scissors. They're made for paper crafting. They're sharp. They make a nice clean cut. You can get down into the fancy elements of the dress and the lace and whatnot. So those were the 2 pairs of scissors that I used. The paste I used was Yes Paste, and this is, you know, it's acid free. It's a beautiful product. You probably don't need to use. It's, you know, it's a nice paste. It's worth having around, I think. And I watered it down. So I'll show you that when we go through it. You'll need a dish for a little bit of water. You will need a paintbrush to paint on the glue. I also used a brayer. You can also use a bone folder if you want. A brayer just is almost like if you've ever applied wallpaper or done any kind of paper crafts. You just push it along the paper, and it kind of makes sure the glue is evenly dispersed so you don't get bubbles. So I found that was helpful. I didn't have a problem with bubbles. And then at the end, for finishing, I used a little bit of sandpaper. I used 320. It's a very fine grit, just to clean up the edges once I had all the layers put together, and I'll show you that when we get to that point. I used some distress ink on the edges. I used antique linen and vintage photo. I actually liked the antique linen. It was just very light. I don't even know if you noticed it. Just to clean up the white edges and make them blend in with what was already going on. That can be applied with one of these rubber or spongy applicators. And then I have this clear coat, satin crystal clear, that I was going to spray them with on the front and the back. I have not done that yet. This is an extra step I think would make them just really more durable and usable. But if you're just making one to stick into your sewing basket or have as a reminder of the entire story of stitching and learning in the 19th century, you can choose to do that or not. So what's the first thing I did? The first thing I did, and we are going to, like I said, do a back-to-back one because it's the most tricky. I started with the front, and I used the more delicate scissors, and I just kind of rough cut. I rough cut around because I like the actual cut where I'm cutting right up against the image to be, once it's glued on to the file board, the file paper. All right, so I just cut it real rough, just like that. And then I got set up for some gluing. Okay, I'm set up for gluing. Since I have a full file folder here, I don't need to lay anything down because I'm just going to work on top of that. But if you're working with a smaller piece of paper, you definitely want to protect your surface. I've put just a little bit of water in here. I don't know if you can see that. So this Yes paste is really potent. It's great stuff. And so I find I don't need a ton of it, but you can play with it and experiment with it and see what works best for you. But I like to wet my brush first, and then I just go around the top of the paste jar. And sometimes some people like to make a slurry or, you know, work within the bowl. I do it a little bit differently. I'm sure there's other techniques. Like I said, I'm just showing you how I did it. So I start painting on the back of my rough cut image, and I try to, you know, go in a pattern, make sure I'm getting good coverage, and I'll just dip a little, get a little water, and then run it around in here again, and just cover the whole thing, especially the edges. You know, I do recommend pasting the entire thing, because if you don't, you'll end up with a bubble in the middle. All right, and then just place it on the file folder and use your brayer to roll it down. Make sure none of the edges are curling up. Okay, and then you just wait. You need to wait a little bit until this dries and isn't going to slip within your scissors. So I would, you know, I waited, I don't know, maybe an hour or so. I could go over there and feel that the paper I couldn't pull the paper up at all. And then I knew it was safe to cut. But you just want to make sure that's dry and completely adhered to the paper. And this Yes paste is so great because it does some of the work for you as it's drying. It seems to soak and suck into the paper even more. All right, make sure you cover your glue. You're going to use it again, but you don't want it to dry out. And you can leave your brush in the water. You don't want to leave that out in the air because it'll just get all gummed up. Okay? And we'll be back after this is dried, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I've stepped away for about a half an hour, and it's pretty dry. You can see it's kind of curling up. Don't worry, it's not going to be a problem. All right, so what I like to do is I like to rough cut. I just do a rough cut and get all this excess paper away. And then I go in, and that's with these, you know, little more heavy duty scissors. And then I go in with these scissors that are a little bit better for detail, and I just start cutting, and I cut right up against the image. And I'm going to do that all the way around. All right, she's completely cut out. And if I did not have the back of her, or if I chose not to use the back of her, I would then be gluing her directly on to this decorative paper, onto the back. And as soon as it was dry, I would cut it out again. Okay. Since I do have her back, I'm going to cut the back out now as accurately as I can, and then I'm going to see how closely they match up, because they didn't always match up. and it was okay. So let's cut that back out. All right, the front and the back are both cut out, and the next thing I'm going to do is glue this onto the back, and you can see it's matching up pretty well, but you can see it's not matching up perfectly. You can see some of that file folder. Don't worry. After it's all glued, you're going to go in and trim the excess away, looking at it from the back, and then trim the excess away looking at it from the front. So I just do the exact same process as I did when I glued the front onto the file folder, except I'm going to glue it onto the doll. But I just put the doll down, get my glue ready. I'm going to cover that doll, file folder doll, up really well with this Yes paste. Just give it, make sure it has really good coverage, and like I said, it is pretty amazing. It really adheres pretty amazingly well. And I just do a little bit of extra on the edges just because that's where it peels up. And you know what? If it peels up, that's fine too. You can always get in there and dab a little more glue. Okay. And so now I just match it up the best that I can. It's not tacky, too tacky yet that it's going to be difficult to move it. But you can see now as I'm placing that on there, you can see that it's not matching up perfectly. Don't distress. That's how they all are. In fact, it's pretty bad here down at the bottom. But you know what? This part at the top matches pretty well. And since it's not, I can still move it. It's not too stuck. It'll be easier to cut away some of the bottom of the skirt than her head. So I want to make sure the head is matched up, more importantly. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my brayer. And now you can see, you see that? Don't worry about it. We're going to trim that away. And we're going to set her down to dry, and she's starting to curl, but that's okay. We'll flatten her out. She'll be fine. So once that's all glued, set her aside to dry. All right, my front and the back of my doll are glued together, and you can see there's stuff spilling out, so you can start from either side. Doesn't really matter. I take my more detailed paper cutting scissors and I just start cutting away that extra file folder element so that the front and the back line up. And I'm going to go all the way around doing that to clean it up. And guess what? When you turn it over, you're also going to have elements on this side that need to be cleaned up. And so you're just going to have to do that on both sides to get it cleaned up. And once that's done, you can leave it. It's perfectly fine to just be done at this point. But I took a piece of that sandpaper and I just lightly distressed the edges all the way around just to get all those little extra kind of hairy pieces of paper taken care of. And then I took some of the distress ink, and you can, depending on what your ink pad looks like, you can just use it directly from the ink pad and just gently brush it just to kind of give it a little bit of an antique. And you can see it doesn't really even show. Oops. There we go. It doesn't really even show that much. It just kind of cleans up the edge and takes away that white. You can maybe see that a little bit. And that's just an extra step if you want. And then, like I said, after they're all done, I think I'll lay them out and spray them with this acrylic sealer from the front. Make sure they're completely dry, turn them over, spray them on the back. And then you have just a really nice, sturdy paper doll. Make a set, make a box, make them for a child in your life, make them for yourself. Make one to put in your work basket, just to remember what else was going on during the time of all this stitching that we love to do in the 19th century. And now I'm going to take you on to one of the links that I've provided below, so I can show you exactly how I access these images. And there you'll find that there are lots of images on the internet, on Pinterest, of paper dolls, and if you're using them for your own collection and information, you can download them and print them out and do the same thing that I've done here today with these from the Cooper Hewitt. So let's go onto the Cooper Hewitt and look at how I accessed these images to print. And once you're, I forgot to mention, if you feel like your paper dolls are kind of curling, just place them under a stack of books. After they're dry, you know there's no glue seeping out that's going to get on your book. You can put them between layers of some kind of a parchment paper or something that is easy to peel away if you feel like they're curling. They should flatten out as they dry, but if that's a problem, you can take care of it that way. Okay, this is the link to the Cooper Hewitt where you can download the images. And I want to show you, I want you to notice here where it says there are 2 other images of this object. So if I click on that, it's going to take me to the dress front by itself, and then the doll front and the doll back. All right, and so let's say I want to print all of these. And I also want you, well, before we do that, let's look over here. These are in the section called Print Paper Doll Costume in White with Black Spots. There are several of these that are available, and I've linked several, I think 5 or 6, in the bottom of my video. You can find more. You can also find additional images where they would like a donation. And if you are downloading several, you might want to donate. Anyway, so you click on the image that you want, and then I right-click, and I open the image in a new tab. All right, and so then up here at the top, let's see if you can see that right here. It's a new tab, so I'm going to click on that. And now I have the paper doll dress in the size that I want to print. And then I just control print. And they should all end up close to the same size. And as you can see from the demonstration, the tutorial I did, there's some overlap. They're not perfect. I did not cut out, I tried cutting out these black spaces, and it wasn't worth it. It was a lot of work. It was hard. It was fussy. It weakened the arm. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want. I've also linked an early book on how to make paper dolls, and at the end are hand-drawn paper dolls that I think you'll find really delightful. So have fun. Explore all the links that I've shared with you below. Make some paper dolls. Add them to your stitchy box. And please share with me what you've done. I'd love to see. And if you find any other treasures, I'd definitely like to know about that too. So thank you for joining me, and I hope this tutorial helped. If you make some paper dolls, please share them on Instagram, #first_stitches, or just send them to me in a private message. I love to see what you're doing. As always, until I see you again, make time for stitching and all the things you love.